And if we sort of dissect this fundamental value equation here, this VA minus PA can be conceptualized as a customer's incentive to buy. In other words, it's CIB, or it's the customer's motivation to buy. Because as you can see, as V minus P for brand A, as that difference becomes larger, again, remember that this V is expressed in monetary terms. Again, a good example is cost saving. So it's the cost saving, it's the economic value that a customer experiences by using brand A. Again, so that's expressed in monetary terms, minus the price of brand A. Obviously, because it's priced, that's going to, again, be expressed in monetary terms. So the greater the difference between VA minus PA, the more incentive, the more motivation that a customer will feel to buy brand A. I mean, if you think about this, VA minus PA, in layman's language, I mean, this is nothing more than value for money. So we use this expression a lot just, in everyday life. That product or that brand has good value for money. So basically it means that for the price that I'm paying, I'm getting a good value by, choosing that brand over, a competitive brand. So that's what VA minus PA is. So which entails that a customer will prefer, brand A when the following condition is met. When VA minus PA is greater than VB minus PB. Because this means that the customer's incentive to buy for brand A, or the value for money for brand A, is greater than the customer's incentive to buy for brand B, which would be, in this case, the competitor. So if we assume that, brand A is our focal brand and B is the next best alternative offering, which is basically the next closest competitor, then customers will prefer offering A when that condition is met. But if you look at that equation, let's assume that companies do not compete on value, or customers, for some reason, do not understand or do not appreciate value. So in that equation, that VA minus PA is greater than VB minus PB. If we delete, in other words, if we scratch out VA and VB in that equation, then we're left with negative PA is greater than negative PB, which eventually means that PA is less than PB. So we can go from VA minus PA is greater than VB minus PB to PA is less than PB when firms ignore value in their business model, or customers do not appreciate or ignore value when they, buy products. So as we go from one equation to the next, where PA is less than PB, that basically means that in order for now brand A to be attractive compared to brand B, its next best alternative offering, they have to lower their price, which this implies that it's the beginning of a price war. So if you ignore value from your business model, that means that you're basically left with price to compete with. And the only way to win, customers is if you, continuously lower your price. But we know that that's a very dangerous, business model to have. There's so much that you can do in terms of competing based on price. It can lead to a vicious cycle, a death spiral. So this again underscores the importance of companies, that need to understand the significance of value and the role of value in business models. So we're going to look at a couple of key concepts along with some equations, and I hope these equations don't confuse our students here. Don't try to get bogged down by the equations, but just try to understand this from a conceptual perspective. I think that will be a lot easier in terms of grasping the big idea. So we have what's called the value in use, VIU, okay? And again, we're going to use the subscripts A and B, where A represents my brand, the focal brand, and B represents the next best alternative offering, okay, which is the competitor brand, the next closest competitor brand. So what is value in use? So VIU represents the superior benefits in excess of cost and price. So it's the benefits minus the cost and price. So in other words, it's the delta that a customer gets, or a customer or a company gets from purchasing and using your firm's market offering rather than a competitor's. So if you look at that equation, VIUAB, the first parentheses is the difference between VA and VB. So it's the difference in economic value between my brand and the next best alternative offering. And then we subtract the price differential, the difference in price between my brand, which is represented as PA, and the next best alternative offerings price, which is PB. So let's assume that, VA minus VB is a positive number. Because again, recall that this VA and VB were referring to, economic value, which can be expressed in monetary terms. So that VA minus VB, if we assume that that's a positive number, that means that my brand is providing more economic value than the next best alternative offering, which is a good thing for my brand because I am providing more economic value to my customers than the next best alternative offering. So VA minus VB is a positive number. Now let's look at PA minus PB, which is the difference in price between my brand and the next best alternative offering. So that PA minus PB can be equal to 0, that could be less than 0, or it could be greater than 0. So let's look at each of these three scenarios. So when PA minus PB is equal to 0, that means that, despite that my brand, A, provides more economic value than your brand, the next best alternative offering, B, I am charging the same price as B, which, a lot of companies do. They provide more economic value. Despite that, they charge, price parity. They charge the same price. So that means that PA minus PB is equal to 0, and VA minus VB is a positive number. So then, this whole thing, VIUAB, will be a positive number, which is a good thing. Right? That means that, my brand A is providing more value than brand B, taking into account any price differential. Now, let's move on to the second scenario where PA is less than PB. So this is even, from a customer's perspective, this is even better. Because this is saying that, brand A provides more economic value than brand B, but it's charging a lower price than brand B. So when PA minus PB is a negative number, and we have a negative in front of that, price differential, that means that's going to be positive. So that positive is going to be tacked on to an already existing positive, which is the differential between VA and VB. So then VIUAB will be even a more positive number. So that's good as well. Now, the last scenario where VA minus PB is greater than 0. So this means that PA, the price of brand A, is greater than the price of brand B. Now, we have to be careful here, right? Because typically, if a company provides more economic value than its next best alternative offering, a logical, a natural, reasoning would be, since I'm providing more economic value, I want to charge a higher price compared to the next best alternative offering. And that makes logical sense, and a lot of customers would think that that's a fair thing to do. However, if they charge a higher price, where that price differential between PA and PB, that differential is greater than the difference between VA and VB, then this whole VIUAB will become a negative number. So this kind of shows you that, brand A can charge a higher price than brand B, but it cannot charge a higher price to the point where it negates or nullifies or cancels out or washes out the economic value differential that it has created through VA minus VB. So you just have to be a company has to be very careful in terms of, the price that it can charge above and beyond brand B when it has created a positive economic value. It cannot charge a higher price to the point where that price is great, that difference in price is greater than the difference in economic value that it has created. So this suggests that VIU can be used as a basis for a value proposition. Now, let's look at this next concept called value in use price, VIU price. Now, this is defined as the indifference price at which the customer firm or a customer would have no preference between your market offering or a competitor's offering. Or put differently, another way to define and conceptualize VIU price is the maximum price that a firm can charge to its customers without losing them to its competitors. Okay, so it's the maximum price that a company can charge to its customers without losing them to its competitors. They mean the same thing. In the definition that I just suggested, there's a key word in that definition that is kind of subtle. It doesn't stand out, but it's a subtle word, but nonetheless, it's a very, very important word. Can anyone guess what that word may be? It's the word can. So, like I said again, it's the maximum price that a firm can charge to its customers without losing them to its competitors. So that means that since it's can, it doesn't mean that they have to, but it just means that they can if they want to. But in reality, companies will not. So that's kind of like a theoretical maximum price, a ceiling price that companies can be aware of, but in reality they seldom charge. But again, that's why it's can and it's not must or should. So let's look at this VIU price AB. That's defined as the price of B, PB, plus the difference in economic value between brand A and B, which is VA minus VB. So again, let's take the example of where VA minus VB, we can think of VA minus VB, the differential in economic value between the two brands. We can think of three scenarios where it can be zero, it can be less than zero, it can be greater than zero. So if VA minus VB is equal to zero, that means that my brand A is not providing any more economic value compared to brand B. So then what's the maximum price that I can charge to my customers without losing them to the competition? Well, if I'm not providing any more economic value, compared to the next best alternative offering, what gives me the right to charge more than brand B? You really don't. So that's why if VA minus VB is equal to zero, then VIU price AB will be equivalent to PB. Because if VA minus VB is zero, zero plus PB is PB. If VA minus VB is greater than zero, that means that my brand A is providing more economic value than brand B. So if I'm providing more economic value, I should be able to charge more. But how much more? By that differential amount more. So if VA minus VB is a positive number, then the maximum price that I can charge would be that differential in economic value plus the existing price of PB, of brand B, which is PB. The last scenario is when VA minus VB is a negative number, is less than zero, which means that my brand is providing less economic value than brand B. If I'm providing less economic value than brand B, then what gives me the right to charge the same price or higher than brand B? I don't. Therefore, my price, the maximum price that I can charge should be lower than PB. But then how much lower? Lower by that differential economic value amount, which is VA minus VB. So VA minus VB will be a negative number. So then you subtract that from PB, which should give you the maximum price that, brand A should be able to charge to its customers without losing them to brand B. Therefore, you can use VIU price as a reference point, right? As a reference point in price negotiations with a customer.